Deni Avdija. And by the way, can I say, when Googling a basketball player, as I did in the Safeway parking lot around 3:45 yesterday, as I was listening to Rip City Drive, running some errands, getting some stuff done before I hunkered in for the draft, and it was like, oh, well, it's just reports. Blazers send Malcolm Brogdon in the 14th and a slew of other picks in 2029, which that's not a real year. That's never going to happen. But isn't it funny when you always think about like these future draft? Oh, the 2029 picks. Like, that's not a real year. That's never going to come around. For Deni Avdija. And first off, we ought to learn how to say his name, which I practiced all night. But then Googling him and going like, all right, who is Deni Avdija? Well, first off, Brenden, good morning. How we doing? How we feeling after the draft?
I'm feeling good.
I'm feeling pretty optimistic.
I think it was all considering a pretty good night for Portland, and I had some fun with it too. I'll say I wish the draft both rounds were still on one day.
Now, I do understand where, like, our reporter friends, like, we're going to talk to Sean Highkin coming up in the third hour, and I would imagine guys like Sean Highkin, Aaron Fentress, friend of the program, and the rest of them probably fairly happy that not only the Blazers drafted at 7, but then didn't have to wait until the entire first round and second round before they could eventually get to hear from Joe Cronin. We're going to hear from Joe Cronin coming up here in just a bit. But, Brenden, you know this. In my evaluation of players, what are my two criteria? What are my two criteria for the Portland Trail Blazers in adding players to this roster?
Tall and can shoot.
Boom, 6'9", and he shoots 37% from three. That's my guy. There
Coming off
we
a
go.
breakout year two, and I know we're getting a little in the weeds on this, Justin. But
37% from three and 6'9", Brenden.
Yeah.
That's all I care about.
And one of the most, I saw multiple people put this out there. Maybe the best value contract in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
Starts at 15 this year, and it goes down. Justin, how many players' contracts
Who's his agent?
goes down by year?
That ain't a Rich Paul client.
Yeah, so at the end of that 4 years, it's 11. That's a steal for where he's at. So hope he fits well with the Blazers for sure.
Well, I mean, look, this is a guy who played in 75 games last year, scored 15 points a game. I think pulled in like 9 boards. But more important, like I said, 6'9" swingman that can shoot threes. Hello, NBA in 2024. This is what you need on your roster. And for those wondering, like, did the Blazers give up too much? The market for Malcolm Brogdon, last trade deadline, the market for Malcolm Brogdon was 2 second-rounders. That was the market. You were never going to get a first-rounder for Malcolm Brogdon. Wasn't going to happen. The 14th pick in this draft had even less value. Who was the guard that the Blazers took and traded to the Wizards?
Bub Carrington, right?
Bub Carrington.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And now if that dude turns out, you never know.
Well, that could hurt, but you know.
But you were never going to draft him, though. Also, when we're going to talk about Clingan here in just a moment, but you get Deni Avdija. This dude's better than anybody you were going to draft at 14.
Without a doubt.
Better than anybody you were going to draft at 14. Better than probably any second rounder you were going to get in a Malcolm Brogdon trade. Nobody was going to give you a future first rounder for Malcolm Brogdon, and nobody was going to give you a first rounder this year. And by the way, if you were the Blazers, why would you want an extra pick this year? You already had 2. So I like the move. We talked about it with Keith Smith. I still don't quite understand how the luxury tax works, but I do know that when you're really bad, 21 wins for the Blazers, you don't want to also be really expensive. So value contract, and they need to come up with like basketball CBA for dummies. I'd probably be like LeBron and read the first 3 pages and then give up and tell everybody I read it. But from what I understand, it's not just about saving money. Sure, that's part of it. You don't want to be writing checks and also not winning basketball games. That's not how you run a business, throwing money out the window. And yes, at the end of the day, this is a business. But more importantly, staying below the luxury tax when you are not a playoff team, it keeps you with options moving forward when hopefully you do become a playoff team, because you hear about the first apron, and that first apron is there, and then you got that second apron, and you start paying players, and then all of a sudden, well, now your salary cap and the options of your financial options in your future are limited the more you are over the cap. Get under that cap because you're not good enough to take risks in terms of being over the cap and hitting into that apron. So I like the move there with Deni Avdija. Like I said, 15 points a game. Length. Shooting prowess. Boom. Exactly what this team needs. So pretty pumped about that. Then, not really in any surprise. Brenden, you said Charlotte. Charlotte was hinting at Clingan. They were kicking the tires, maybe.
Yeah, they're poking around, but they like their center a lot. So I think that was ultimately the reason they went the way that
Who'd they go get? The guy out of Duke?
Oh gosh, why am I already drawing a blank on his name? The kid from France that went high.
Not Risache, not Sar.
Salon is how you say his last name. I'm going to butcher the first name, so I'm not going to try. But he was the guy who they're like, hey, this guy's projected in the teens, and Charlotte took him real high. So we'll see. I think there were more than one draft analyst that I was watching yesterday, Justin, who said the Blazers might be sending Charlotte a fruit basket for allowing Donovan Clingan to fall into their laps.
No, I hope so, but can I also say...
But we'll see, right?
And I don't... Look.
You never know with the draft.
I don't want to be a gloomy Gus today, because I'm not going to be. I'm fairly optimistic. I like what the Blazers did yesterday. I think as an organization, they got better. That's your whole objective. Day one, do you get better? You moved on from Malcolm Brogdon, which you had to do. You've somewhat, more on this coming up in a minute, cleared up a little bit of a logjam there at guard. Is more moves to come? Did Joe Cronin hint at that last night? Play you that sound coming up in just a bit. But they got better by adding Avdija, financially getting better like that. You bring in Clingan. Nobody knows this draft, but here's where I'm going to be a bit of a gloomy Gus. You know what frustrates me? And I get it. It's the job. All right? I get it. It's the job. Did I say that enough? But to all the draft people who are like, this draft is down, the talent level in this draft is down. Then afterwards, you're going to start criticizing picks. You just spent the last month and a half talking about how this is a down draft. And then you're going to have the gall. Well, that's a word we don't use anymore. You're going to have the gall to criticize. No, you kept telling us this is a down draft. Well, anybody from 1 to 14 might hit. Heck, Dalton Connect fell to 17. Nobody saw that one coming.
Lakers feel good today. Braun feels real happy.
Real interested to see what the Blazers do later on tonight. That might come up a little bit later on in the program. But getting back to Clingan. This is Joe Cronin talking about where the Blazers are, because now you go, okay, drafted a 7-foot center. Justin, do the Blazers have a 7-foot center? They do. They also got, how tall is Robert Williams? He's
how old?
How tall? He also a 7-footer?
It's like 6'9", 6'10". It's close.
But plays center. So you've got a little bit of a log jam there, but Joe Cronin addressed this and kind of talked about where the Blazers are in terms of you can't even worry about position. So this is him talking about where they are in terms of talent acquisition and what Clingan brings to the roster. Here's Cronin from last night.
I think, as we approach this, we're still in such a talent acquisition mode that we're not super concerned about who's playing ahead of who or who's playing next to who. It was more for Donovan. It was obviously get a really talented guy who addresses some huge needs for us, specifically, like we said, the rim protection, the defense, the rebounding, the offensive rebounding.
You're not good enough to worry about who's playing where. We are so far down the road before we get to starting lineups, before we get to fit, and before we get to team chemistry and all that stuff. And I do like that Joe Cronin is realistic about that. we have to change our brains a little bit. We have it's human nature. It's sports fan nature. And I get it because I do it too. But it is sports fan nature to just oh, well, is he going to start? Is he going to be a backup? It's we are nowhere close to good enough to worry about that quite yet. We are simply in the mode, give us as much talent as we can acquire today, get us under the luxury tax, get us in a financial situation. And basically he said without saying, and then Coach Phillips will figure all that out come September. Right now it's June. And we are in talent acquisition mode. Now, Joe Cronin had other things to say. One very interesting thing. Dropped a couple of names. Didn't include another. Is this just us reading between the lines, or did Joe Cronin really tell us something of the future of the next couple of weeks and next couple of months with this organization going forward? We'll play you that sound, and we'll talk about where the Blazers go from here now that the first round is over. Malcolm Brogdon is out. What moves are coming down the pike? Did Joe Cronin hint at us yesterday? We'll talk about that next here on 620 Rip City Radio. All right, so first round came and went last night. Again, I like the pick with Donovan Clingan. I guess, like I said yesterday, and not much has changed except for a couple of roster pieces, but I said this yesterday. Other than maybe a stretch with Zach Edey at 7, which how are they feeling in Memphis right now? Because Zach Edey went 9th overall. Other than maybe that, and again, maybe we were being unfair to Zach Edey, but like, was there a pick that the Blazers were going to make at 7 that would have really bummed you out? Like, again, those names didn't exist. This entire draft is nothing but upside, right? There's like even Ricochet, which we learned how to say his name last night.
My bad.
It's all of our bad.
It was an interesting pronunciation, and he's got a little English to learn.
Well, here's the deal. Resiture, you're in America now. We say Resiture.
I love it.
Until you score 14 a game, we'll start saying Ricochet. But even that guy, maybe he'll be, full-on starter for the Hawks, day one contributor. I don't know, but it feels like everybody in this draft, and somebody might pop, who knows, but it feels like everybody in this draft is about 2 or 3 years away. That's kind of the feel that there was no, like, you got Reed Shepherd. That guy's an NBA caliber shooter. Is he an NBA caliber player? Does he have the physicality? Like, where's he going to fit? Even Alex Sarr. By the way, how nuts. I didn't know that the Alex Sarr journey of like, oh yeah, I went to, from like 15 on, it's like, yeah, I went to Spain, and then he's from France, and then he went to Spain, and then he went to Perth, Australia, which is on the real far side of Australia. Like, and he's only 19, and he's been in 3 different countries, played professional basketball in 3 countries, and he's 19.
Grown up quick, to say the least, Justin. But
like, when you heard, like, Ricochet was described as, I think, is either Ricochet or Sarr, but somebody said, 3-and-D role player type of guy. Like, that's what we're talking about, top 3 picks here on, in the NBA draft. Like, that's the way we're describing this. So can't help but feel optimistic about what the Blazers did yesterday, because at the end of the draft, and you take a look back, you're like, are you better or worse? And I think the Blazers are better. I think they're on a better path forward. And so you bring in Clingan. Now, there's an interesting spot here, right? Where you've got DeAndre Ayton. What's Ayton got? 2 years left on his deal for the Blazers, I believe?
2 years, about $35 million per.
So Ayton's got 2 years left on his deal. He is clearly a starting caliber center. You look at the second half that DeAndre Ayton had. Now, is that the real DeAndre Ayton? Who knows? But I said it a month ago. Other than Scoot and Shaden, and really I would only say Scoot. Like nobody's protected on this roster. More on that in a moment. But our good friend Aaron Fentress asked Joe Cronin about the future of DeAndre Ayton, and was this pick of another 7-foot center in any way, shape, or form an indictment on the way DeAndre Ayton played? And again, Joe Cronin talked about where they are at from an organizational standpoint in putting talent together. So here's Joe Cronin talking about Clingan and Ayton and potentially the future of both of them.
At some point, someone's got to go, right?
Well, I don't know about go. I think, well, first off, Donovan, he's got rookie year can be interesting. He's got a lot to learn still. The NBA is going to be an adjustment. But as far as DeAndre goes, I'm really excited about DeAndre. I mean, obviously we sought him out last summer, and I thought we saw some really good things from him as the season went on. I mean, DeAndre is incredibly talented, a really good player in this league. So, I always go back to this, but we're not good enough to be content at any one position or even just at the starting position. Like, we've got to build depth. We've got to get real players all throughout this roster. And that's my challenge, and that's what I'm going to continue to do, even though, sometimes, like for me, it's a success if you're finding other players that are going to challenge some of your best players. Okay, we're doing good because we're continually building our talent base.
There's a couple of things there that I love. Every once in a while, Joe Cronin kind of not slips up, but he gets a little too real. It's like, look, we need to put real players on this roster. I'm sorry. We got to find
big words.
We got to find real players.
I like that, though.
But it's true. I mean, sorry, it's not show friends, it's show business, right? You want to get to the playoffs. It's an ugly business in rebuilding, and you have to be realistic about where you are and where you're going. And part of that is, we owe this guy $70 million over the next 2 years. He clearly put up numbers in the second half of the season that would make it to where he is no doubt locked to be the starting center for the Blazers. We're not good enough yet. You're not good enough yet. And I don't know if he hinted at this or if it's just my own brain, but I like kind of the mentality of like, all right, we drafted a center behind you, DeAndre. What's your plan? Because in all honesty, when do you think the last time DeAndre Ayton was ever challenged for a starting spot? In all seriousness. When was the last time? High school? No. One and done at Arizona? No. He was the number 1 overall pick in Phoenix, came in, filled that role. It was clear he was going to be the starter. Now, during that playoff run, during that finals run, remember, that's where the disconnect with DeAndre Ayton and Monty Williams started, was because you can't play in the fourth quarter. And I'm fairly certain, because in the NBA, right, you can either be benched, you can come off the bench, or you can get benched in the fourth quarter. It's worse to be benched in the fourth quarter, I think. And we've seen that. We saw that with Giddey at Oklahoma City. He's now gone. And we've seen that with a handful of guys where it's just like, we can't trust you to play in the fourth quarter. And 2 years ago, where the rift between DeAndre Ayton and Phoenix started, was essentially Monty Williams was going like, yeah, we can't play in the fourth quarter, dude. Can't trust you. Was it Al Horford? Who was eating his lunch in the fourth quarter there? Or was it Giannis? Like, Giannis is eating your lunch, dude. Can't play in the fourth quarter. So, but if you think about it, probably from high school to college to there in Phoenix, probably not until what? Year 4 of his NBA career was DeAndre Ayton ever challenged for playing time. Ever. And then, of course, the rift happens. He comes to the Blazers, and pretty clear, unless you're injured, you're the starting center because, no offense to Duop Reith, we got nobody else. So maybe for the first time in his career, DeAndre Ayton is going to have somebody challenge him for a starting spot. And I like that because, again, you get into a spot where it's like, all right, how do you respond? We know clearly DA has got the talent to be a 23-13 guy in this league. We know he does. Can there be a consistency there? Well, maybe being pushed by this hotshot kid out of UConn who's coming off of back-to-back national championships, who's, again, used to winning, used to starting. When was the last time Donovan Clingan wasn't the best player on his team? I mean, UConn, he was one of a lot of really good players.
UConn doesn't win back-to-back titles without him.
No. Like, or what's his name? The guard that went.
Castle,
that dude's good too.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? With DeAndre, totally. This is maybe the first time in his basketball life, his competitive basketball life, where DeAndre Ayton might be challenged. And I think for the Blazers, you owe it to the organization. See how he responds. Because maybe he responds like a competitor. And
like Aaron Rodgers when they drafted Jordan Love, right?
Take
what did Aaron Rodgers do?
Take an MVP performance or an all-star performance.
That's a stretch.
That's a stretch, but you mentioned Aaron Rodgers.
No, I'm just saying. Like,
he
that's
opened
the best
door, Your Honor. That's what they say on the court shows.
But that's the best example, right? It's the Packers draft Jordan Love, and all of a sudden Aaron Rodgers is like, ho hum, I'm going to go win 2 straight MVPs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Right?
And so, and there is a possibility where maybe DeAndre Ayton's ego gets a little bit bruised, and we've seen it before. Well, good news is Blazers have got options. Now, Joe Cronin said right there, like, I wouldn't say somebody's got to go, but I don't see any way, shape, or form where you have Duop Reith, who's making, $1 million, 1.7.
Super low, cheap contract for the next 3 years.
So you got Duop Reith. You've got Robert Williams, who's at $10 million per.
11, and then 12. So each year, obviously.
Rounded to the round number.
Close enough.
Makes it easier for the math. And then DeAndre Ayton, and then that's. Now, I know that Robert Williams can play 4. But, again, you're going to be playing 4, you better be able to shoot threes. You know what I mean? So, I don't know of a situation where those 4 guys can all coexist in the front court, because there will be a time there in the very near future where you're just going to be like, all right, the core of this organization moving forward, and you'll know by Christmas, it's either going to be Scoot Shaden and DA, or it's going to be Scoot Shaden and Clingan. And maybe it's 4, but it's not going to be Clingan, DA, and Robert Williams. That's not going to happen, and you'll probably know it by Christmas. Maybe we'll know it before then. Now,
depends on what the value market is for those guys, right, Justin? I mean, again, as I mentioned to you early, I think
we get so obsessed with value. Finish your thought. I apologize.
No. I think it could be tough to get because, again, DeAndre Ayton's not going to a rebuilding team. If he was going to be moved, he'd probably go to a team that wanted to win. Will a contender look at $35 a year, right? That's a lot, right? Robert Williams, opposite, makes less money, but as you told me, what can you count on his availability, right? The last couple of years. He hasn't proven he can be healthy. Mm-hmm. So I think when you bring all that together, you realize they took Clingan. Who knows what Joe Cronin pretty much hinted. It could be a remix year for Clingan. It could be, heavy remix, maybe playing a few games as they figure it out. But I don't think that you're going to see any major moves right away. I think they might just, again, try to continue to balance out the roster. And yesterday helped.
Let me ask some questions here. I have multiple questions. I don't see the Blazers being out of the lottery next year. I don't think that's going to happen. It'd be nice, but I don't see that happening. Let's say they're not 20 wins like they were this year. Let's say they add 10. Be a nice addition. It'd be nice to see them, essentially win more than a third of their games. Let's put them at over under 30.5 wins next year. If you're right around that 30-win mark, your number 7 overall guy better be playing on your roster, not on the remix roster. Because I keep hearing Cronin saying the same thing over and over again. We're not good enough. We're not good enough. And I agree with him. You're not. Clingan's playing for the remix. I think something went wrong. Something bad's happened.
Maybe.
But that's just. So here's the other part of it. And this is where I think Joe Cronin got really real last night when talking about who the Blazers are committed to. It was interesting, Justin. Was that a topic you talked about earlier in the week? I sure did. Did I ask this question? I sure did not. But let's hear about who the Blazers, Joe Cronin talked about who the Blazers moving forward after now the draft and after the second round, what the Blazers' plan is and who they're committed to. Very interesting choices by Joe Cronin here. Let's hear from him last night.
I don't know if I'd say likely. I think throughout this whole offseason, I've been open-minded. Again, with the mindset that we need to get better, and I think in some ways we need to get different. So I think my goal is to just, really work the phones and be open-minded and be opportunistic about, finding players that can help us in not just the short term, but the long term. And I think you'll see that theme with, some of our additions that we are looking at, putting a runway here where these guys can be really good for hopefully a long time, and just trying to find guys that fit that mold.
Do we have the one where it talks about being committed to Scoot and Shaden? Did we find that one yet? But It might have been right before there. It's always fun editing on the fly. But there was a point last night when Cronin came in and said, "Look, we are committed to Scoot and Shaden." That was it. Those were the names he dropped. That was the names on the roster that he talked about. Didn't talk about being committed to Anthony Simons or Matisse Thybulle or being committed to Jeremy Grant or being committed to DeAndre Ayton. Now, maybe it's just because those are the young players. Scoot and Shaden, boom, boom, it goes together. But I found it very interesting. Found it very interesting that of all like the players to talk about, where do you go from here now that the first round is over? Well, we're committed to building around Scoot and Shaden. Scoot and Shaden is who we are committed to. Because now that Malcolm Brogdon is gone, there is now another question there in the backcourt. Because in the backcourt, with the Blazers and in particular with Joe Cronin, his actions will always speak more than his words. Look at what they do, not what they say. Because as a figurehead, you have to say all the right things. You can't throw players under the bus, and you have to keep player relationships somewhat good. But if you look at what they're doing, the Blazers are getting bigger. They're getting longer. They are adding length, more physicality. You know what that tells me? That 3-guard lineup ain't happening. That if you look at, and I know that Scoot's not the tallest player, but physical, strong, guy's jacked. Shaden, for a 2-guard, which I believe he should be playing, long, length. You go get Deni Avdija, 6'9", swingman. You just drafted a 7-footer. You have to get bigger. You have to add length. You have to add height. That 3-guard lineup I don't see happening any way, shape, or form. And when you hear a GM say, well, we're committed to Scoot and Shaden, well, that means they're not coming off the bench. Anthony Simons, $20-some million, and basically a starting guard in your organization for the last 3 years. You can't have that guy come off the bench. It sounded to me like the Blazers, and more in particular Joe Cronin last night, was hinting at the fact that there might be bigger moves to come, in particular in the backcourt. You can look at the logjam that was created in the front court with did we ever find that? Did we find him talking? No? Okay. So looking at the front court, you got DeAndre Ayton, you got Robert Williams, and you draft Clingan. There's going to be something to shake out, but that's also still somewhat of a logjam coming up in the backcourt. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. Normally, we will go on campus. We're going to forego that today. We are doing Blazers draft reaction all morning long. Don't forget, we have got Francis Williams coming up on the big show in a little under an hour. Also, Sean Hyken's going to join the show. And, hey, well, we're all excited about the draft. Don't forget about winning stuff. How about Tuesdays on Rip City Drive? Ticket Tuesday. It's not just a clever name. We're giving away tickets. We keep the winning streak alive with exclusive tickets to the Hillsboro Hops all season long. Listen to Rip City Drive every Tuesday afternoon for your chance to win and get your Hops tickets now at hillsborohops.com. Wrapping up hour number 1 next, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, we are currently 65 days away from college football kicking off. Normally, this is the part of the show where we do our on-campus college football segment, but it is a draft reaction spectacular here all day long. So just wanted to continue to give you the update with 65 days away. By the way, fun announcement coming up on Monday here on the big show. So very excited about something coming down the pike for old Rip City mornings. So a fun announcement coming up with regards to college football coming up on Monday. But we are going to continue with draft recap. Clingan goes number 7. The Blazers also bring in Deni Avdija. And again, the question comes down to, what do you do with the rest of the roster? Once again, Joe Cronin last night talked about being committed to Scoot and Shaden. Didn't mention another guy. Here's Joe Cronin from last night.
You know, we're committed to Scoot and Shaden being a massive part of what we're doing, and how do we find ways to, you know, give them the support they need and make them better and maximize their development. So it's continually seeking players that we can add to this roster that we can grow with and build together with.
That says so much right there. All right, a couple of things. First off, it's a dirty little secret. It might not even be a secret, but it is a dirty little reality when you are looking at how rosters, especially in the NBA and the NFL, but in the NBA, when you are looking at how rosters are built, especially rebuilt rosters are put together. Nobody wants to say it, but GMs like their guys. They just do. Now, I understand Joe Cronin was a member of the Blazers organization when they drafted Anthony Simons. Anthony Simons was Neil Olshey's guy. Loved him, gushed over him. What did he say? The best offensive talent we've ever drafted. We have Dame on the team.
And also includes, like, Blake Griffin, too, but no biggie.
But he gushed about, he said the best, most offensive talent that he ever drafted.
Yes, ever. Yeah.
And
so it's like that includes Blake Griffin.
Just
gonna throw that out
Damian
there.
Lillard, CJ McCollum.
Love you, Ant.
But Joe Cronin, as the acting GM, did not draft him. He did draft Scoot, and he did draft Shaden, and he did draft Clingan, by the way. And that's the reality, is GMs like their guys. By the way, take a look at the Boston Celtics. Yes, Danny Ainge's fingerprints are all over the Boston Celtics, but you know what? Brad Stevens did. He also got rid of, like, Smart, got rid of Brogdon,
Move some pieces
around for his guys, bringing in his guys. It happens anytime you see a shift at the top in terms of basketball ops. So there's that. And by the way, our good friend Chris is back on Twitter, and I appreciate him, because I said last segment, you can't have Anthony Simons, I don't believe, coming off the bench. And listener Chris tweets, says, Justin, got to disagree with the take that we can't have $25 million Anthony Simons come off the bench. I think we all know and have known for a while that his optimal role, uninhibited bench gunner. The Blazers should not let sunk costs prevent them from making good choices. Now, I agree with what you're talking about on paper, Chris, but here's where I come in, because I don't know jack about the CBA. Clearly, I've made some dumb comments. I don't know jack about deep, intense basketball statistics. Once you get past shooting percentage, my mind goes, but here's what I know. I know people, I know athletes, and I know how athletes work. And on paper, yeah, that's a great idea. It's a great idea to have Anthony Simons coming off the bench, regardless of what he's making, because that's where he fits in best. But in the NBA, especially, and this is, maybe I'm off base, but I don't think I am. Brenden, what does the NBA do that's just a little bit different than football and baseball in terms of something before the game? Oh, they announced the starting lineups. They announced the starting lineups with flair, with fire, with pyro. Baseball, yeah, it's great. Here's your Chicago Cubs, and they come running out of the dugout, right? Football, sometimes they announce the defense, sometimes they announce the offense. Really doesn't matter. Being in the starting lineup, being out of the starting lineup, other than quarterback and other premier. In basketball, I firmly believe it matters to ego. It matters to happiness. It matters to how your emotions, and this is an emotional league. And I also believe that players and or through players' agents negotiate, hey, this guy's a starter. This guy's willing to come off the bench. Remember when the Blazers had that talk with Carmelo Anthony? Carmelo Anthony, you're going to be willing to come off the bench because that's how we got to use you. And they had to have that conversation. Now, I'm not saying that Anthony Simons is Carmelo Anthony, top 10 scorer of all time. But what I am saying is I go back to when the Blazers were tanking the first time. But remember the first time they were tanking, and for about 2 weeks, Anthony Simons was dropping in like 28, 29, 30 points a game. Going into a restricted free agent year. And all of a sudden, he had right knee soreness. And I was like, if you're an agent, how do you let your client essentially be shut down when you could go into a tank year, and speaking of unhinged, and let your client drop 33 a game because Dame's is under surgery, CJ's traded away. Nobody else on that team could score the ball at all. So, maybe because you had already negotiated the number and he'd got 20-some million per, and that he would be a starter. That stuff is negotiated. So while I understand that basketball strategy-wise, I think Anthony Simons would be great coming off the bench as a spark plug, scorer, gunner, all of that. I don't know if his agent, is he a clutch guy? I don't think so. It was Nurk who was a clutch guy. But
Bill Duffy.
But I don't know if his agent is going to be like, yeah, he's willing to come off the bench. Basketball-wise, it works. And you could go as an organization, you could be like, yeah, and this is the way we see you. This is your role now. But guess what? What have I been saying for like a year? NBA is a feelings-based league. And if you aren't feeling it, trouble happens. Yes, Brenden.
Interestingly enough, Anthony Simons, DeAndre Ayton share an agent.
Something to keep an eye on. All right. Coming up, hour number 2. We'll get back into, I want to talk about Donovan Clingan a little bit more. And what does Deni Avdija bring to this roster as well? Francis Williams, Blazers Network analyst, is going to be joining us coming up at 7:20. So we are locked and loaded on a draft reaction. Rip City Mornings, hour 2 coming up next. 6:20, Rip City Radio. It is 7 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Justin Myers with you. The Blazers had a busy afternoon yesterday into evening. Before the draft even started, they traded away Malcolm Brogdon to the Washington Wizards. The Blazers received former Deni Avdija 14.9 points a game in 75 games last year. The 6'9" swingman from Israel comes to the Blazers along. And so the Wizards get Malcolm Brogdon and the 14th pick, 2029 first round and 2 future seconds. Boom, there it is. Then the draft started, and the Blazers take Donovan Clingan, big man out of UConn, with the 7th pick. Round 2 continues this afternoon. The Blazers have the 34th and 40th selections. We, of course, have wall-to-wall coverage with reaction and the second round here on Rip City Radio. Blazers Network analyst Francis Williams joins the show in 20 minutes. Sean Hyken from the Rose Garden Report joins us in Hour 3, but we start Hour 2 right now at 620 Rip City Radio. Hey, welcome back to Rip City Mornings, everybody. No make or miss today. We are full-on draft reaction because it wasn't really a surprising day. We all kind of knew that Malcolm Brogdon was likely going to be traded. Like the move. I have two criteria when it comes to players coming into the Blazers from this point forward. You better be tall and you better be able to shoot. Well, 37% from 3, Deni Avdija, and he's 6'9". Hey, we can work with that. Now, they did draft Donovan Clingan, what's he officially? Is he 7'2"? Is he 7'2"?
7'2" and a half with shoes.
7'2" and a half.
It was like 7'1" and 3/4 without shoes.
It is so funny what they do in the NBA with regard to height, because for forever it was just like, yeah, that guy's a 7-footer. And then
big boy though.
And then didn't it start with Kevin Durant, where Kevin Durant was like, no, I'm not a 7-footer. I'm 6'11", because if he was a 7-footer, they're like, well, you don't shoot threes because you're a 7-footer.
He's definitely 7 feet tall, folks.
Get your tall behind down on the block. And he's like, no, I'm 6'11". And then they started measuring eye height, right? Because I guess the thought process behind it is if you are being defended, it's what can you see? Eyeballs to the top of your head, from a basketball standpoint, kind of worthless in terms of body parts. Do you know what I mean? Like if you were a footballer, if you were a soccer player, sure, that might matter a little bit. But essentially, from your eyeballs to the top of your cranium, kind of worthless in basketball. And then I saw another one where like they'll used to measure wingspan, but now it's like top of like feet to your dominant hand, basically how much range do you have as a shot blocker? And then shoes, no shoes. What happens if you change out your sneakers? Do you do like Costanza did? Do you remember the episode of Costanza where he realized when he wore Timberlands that it added about 2 inches, so he went to the wedding with painted Timberlands in India? Anyways, that being said, 7'2" and a half. Let's go, Donovan Clingan. And it was the name, really the only name other than Zach Edey a couple days ago that got floated around. But it was really kind of the only name that was out there with the Blazers. Joe Cronin talked about how he was happy with Clingan. He was very high on their board. Didn't say where he was. Let's just say he was higher than where we drafted him. So all in all, I thought a good day for the Blazers yesterday. I know there were some that is frustrated with Malcolm Brogdon, but again, this is the tough part of trades, and this is the tough part of being a fan. Because you always overvalue guys on your team. I saw some fans a little bit frustrated. Why you couldn't get a first-round pick for Malcolm Brogdon? Well, okay. As I have said over and over and over again, picks become players. We become so obsessed with picks. Picks become players. And there is a good chance that no matter what was being offered up for Malcolm Brogdon, whether it was I think the last rumor was at the trade deadline, he was essentially the value was 2 second-rounders. You going to find a second-rounder better than Deni Avdija? Probably not. You going to find anybody better than Deni Avdija who was going to be available at 14 in this draft for the next 2 years? Probably not.
So in my opinion, Justin, the only reason that Blazer fans have anything negative to say about this trade, and to your point, spot on, they haven't become players yet.
Thank you.
It's that 2029 pick. You take
it's not a real year, Brenden.
Right.
That's not so far away.
But you take that out of this deal, and people go, oh, it's an absolute steal for Portland. It's that pick because we don't know what anybody's going to be like in 5 years, right?
I also think
6 years.
there's something else to this, which we don't want to talk about, but we kind of have to talk about, which is this is the return for Damian Lillard. It is. It's the return for Damian Lillard. You traded Damian Lillard away to Milwaukee. That got you Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday, then you traded. That got you Malcolm Brogdon. And how far down the rabbit hole do we go to where it was like, all right, it's not the Damian Lillard trade anymore? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, really
but I think there's still something there that it's like, all right, when is the big prize going to cash in for the Damian Lillard trade? It's like, you already got him. His name's Scoot Henderson. That's it. That's the trade you made. I know it's not actual trade player for player, but that's the decision that you made. You knew once you drafted Scoot, Dame was probably going to request a trade. You knew it in your heart of hearts. We all knew it. That was the decision you made. That was the trade. But I do think there was something to where it's like, all right, so you traded Dame and you got Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday got traded to the Celtics. For that, you got Brogdon and that 14th pick, right?
Robert Williams.
And Robert Williams. Still have Robert Williams. Brogdon and that 14th pick, just, boy, they were arm in arm for a good year, weren't they? And then they both went to Washington. But like I said, Brogdon's value was about 2 second-rounders at the trade deadline. That's why they didn't trade him at the deadline. And then that's why he got elbow tendonitis that kept him out for the whole rest of the year. That's interesting. Because you couldn't afford for him to get hurt because between the All-Star break to now, can't have that guy get hurt because you were planning on trading him. And like I said, picks become players. And also you hope that, you might be in a bit of a pickle in 2029, but you hope that is champagne problems. That's your hope. Your hope that by 2029 that pick going to Washington, that's a champagne problem because you have got all-star center and Donovan Clingan and Scoot Henderson's on the All-NBA. Like, that's what you hope. That's the plan anyways. I think that's what we're all doing here. Like, that's so far down the road. But I get it. It's instant reaction. But I think it's a win. I think it's a win of a trade because I am a firm believer, just like I talk about with college football and the transfer portal, right? Like, this high school player might ultimately by his junior year, this 4-star guy might be something, but that guy I know can play right now. I know Deni Avdija is going to be able to come in and, all right, maybe he doesn't shoot 37%. Shoots 35% from three, shoots 33% from three. I'll take that.
And I think the thing
I'll take that. And a guy that can play.
Yeah, you got a guy who's a starter, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. The Wizards were absolutely terrible this year. But if you go back and look at their stats, their highlights, because Jordan Poole was such a failure, and I don't think that's a
You just love trashing Jordan Poole, don't you?
Well, Draymond knocked some sense out of him, I should say. But
there was something about Jordan Poole that just rubbed you the wrong way. And I get it when he was like, I'm a Splash brother, too. It's like, no, you're not. No, you are not.
But that being said, he was like arguably the lone bright spot on the Wizards this season. So to get a guy who they could slot in as a starter, he could come off the bench, he makes a perfect amount of money, like all that kind of stuff, like you love the trade. So I'm with you. I'm not going to worry about a pick that's 5 years down the line yet.
No, champagne problems, baby.
You have to worry about
hopefully it's champagne problems.
Exactly. What Cronin said, building around Scoot and Shaden. And this guy fits around Scoot and Shaden very well.
So here's what's going to be interesting. You mentioned that Deni Avdija is a starter caliber player.
Can be.
Yes. We know that DeAndre Ayton is a starting center. We know that Joe Cronin said Clingan can be a starter. Who knows? Rookie years. To be fair, Cronin also said rookie years can be tough, which I thought was a smart thing. Like, let's not say, he's coming in, he's going to play. It's like, rookie years can be tough. You only get 5 spots in that starting lineup, Brenden. You only get 5. Scoot's the starting point guard. I have said all in all, Shaedon Sharpe better be starting by year 3. If he's healthy, right? That is a guy that you tanked for. It's year 3. Shaedon Sharpe better be starting. Jeremy Grant, for the time being, still on this roster. That guy's a starter. How much money is he making this year? Jeremy Grant?
At 30.
He's making $30 million.
Second highest paid player.
Let's say Advia is a starter now. Like, what do you do with Thibault? What do you do with Ant? Who else am I missing here in terms of guy? Like, you also got Chris Murray, who you drafted last year. And again, I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying, oh, Chris Murray's.
But Jabari Walker.
But you got Jabari Walker. Like,
Tumani Kamara, who was a starter.
There's a lot of players. Yeah. A lot of players that maybe you expect to have into a rotation there. And
like Kamara started pretty much the whole second half of the season.
And real quick, I want to go back to what Joe Cronin said. Can we play that one more time about him committing to Scoot and Shaedon? Because I think this says so much for where the Blazers may be going this summer.
You know, we're committed to Scoot and Shaedon being a massive part of what we're doing. And how do we find ways to, give them the support they need and make them better and maximize their development? So it's continually seeking players that we can add to this roster that we can grow with and build together with.
There's your answer right there. Scoot and Shaedon are committed, right? Did you also hear what he said there? Putting players that can build and grow. Brenden, players that don't build and grow? 6, 7, 8-year vets. They don't build and grow. And nor should they, by the way. This is not a knock at Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant does exactly what he needed to do. It's like, I drop in this many points, I grab this many rebounds, and you pay me this many millions of dollars. That's not building and growing, though. Is Anthony Simons? I know he's young. It's weird because it feels like he's been here forever. Anthony Simons is in that spot in the NBA where you're just like, yeah, this is what I do. I score this many. And again, it's almost more of a compliment. You play 5, 6, 7 years in the NBA, you're doing something right. You get to a second contract, you get almost to a third contract, you're going to be doing well financially, right? Because that's where a lot of these guys get to. And why you have to be careful when you rebuild. You have to be careful when you rebuild because a lot of these guys get to the point where it's like, no, dude, I score my 17 points, I grab my 9 rebounds, and you know what? You pay me $25 million. And that's the transaction that we're in. Not I'm working to develop, but no. I score you 17 points, and you pay me $14 million or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? So when I hear build and grow, I hear young and young. All right, Francis Williams is going to be joining us just on the other side. Before we get to that, I do want to tell you about Toyota and us here at iHeartRadio. We need your help. That's right, filling the truck with canned and non-perishable food items for the Oregon Food Bank. So bring your donations and look for the specially marked Toyota Tundra this Saturday at Fred Meyer at Southwest Boones Ferry Road in Wilsonville. Sign up for a chance to win the iHeartRadio Music Festival while you're there. Join us at Fred Meyer as we fill the truck for Toyota and the Oregon Food Bank. Francis Williams joins us next, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, very excited to welcome in our next guest. You see him on the Blazer broadcasts on Root Sports. Man who watches all the film, does all the film work for us because I am a lazy media member and I just watch the games. And half the time I'm on Twitter. But Francis Williams, basketball analyst for Root Sports, joining us now on the show. Good morning, Francis. Thanks for joining us. How are we doing?
Everybody doing?
Doing great. Really appreciate your time. I know yesterday was probably a very busy day for you. So again, thankful for you to jump on the show. Just kind of overall, obviously we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of both Clingan and Avdija, but just kind of overall, how are we feeling about the Blazers' day yesterday?
I thought the Blazers had a great day. I mean, they added some pieces in areas of need. It gives them some versatility. I think Clingan is a guy that a lot of people around the league had very high on their board, and I think for the Blazers to be able to get him and really not have to give up anything to get him, I thought it was a blessing the way they were able to acquire him. And then with Avdija, he's a very versatile player, a big wing that can score, which the league, everybody in the league is looking for a guy like that. He's already a proven NBA player, and for those who really don't know much about him, if you just go back and see the two games that he played against the Blazers last season, you'll get a nice snapshot of the type of player that he is because he had two really good games against the Blazers last year.
All right, Francis, let's talk about Donovan Clingan. I know Joe Cronin mentioned yesterday about, adding rim protection, adding some size, adding athleticism. And what did you see from Clingan in this last year at UConn in this run to a national championship? And what do you really like about his game translating to the NBA, especially for the Blazers?
Well, the one thing I liked about him is that, he had to deal with some adversity last season. He was injured early, didn't really get into fall camp with his teammates because he was coming off of an injury, and then he had a midseason setback as well. But for him to do what he needed to do to get his body right, get himself ready for them to make their run in April, I think that says a lot about his commitment to himself and to his body and understanding what it takes to have yourself ready to play. As far as his on the court attributes, I mean, he's got great size. He's mobile. I think he's an underrated passer. I think he has really good hands. I think his body will continue to improve as he puts on weight and gets stronger. Rim protection, I think he already comes into the league with the ability to do that. He'll have to adjust to the physicality and to the speed of the game, but everybody comes into the league having to make those adjustments. But with his size, his basketball IQ, and his understanding and his feel for the game, I think as long as he stays healthy, you've got somebody that could be a contributor for a long time.
Francis, you mentioned it a little bit there, and I know Joe Cronin talked about it last night and hesitating and talking about whether or not someone's going to be a starter or not because, rookie years can be tough, and we know about the upside and the size and the rim protection. How does a guy like Clingan go about making those adjustments? Do you need wake-up calls in the NBA? Is there things he can do before even heading to training camp? How does he go about putting in the work to try to hit the ground running there his rookie year?
Well, you just have to play. I mean,
yeah.
What you're going to experience. I mean, he's going to get to town here in the next couple of days. I'm sure they're going to get ready for summer league, and what he will experience this summer going into the summer league is still not going to be what it's going to be like in October. So there's just adjustments that you have to make, and the only way that you're going to be able to do what you need to do to understand how the NBA works is you got to play. I mean, we saw it with Scoot last year. Scoot was so used to being able to blow by everyone and get to his spots on the floor that he figured out later on in the season. You saw him change the pace, change the direction. You can get to your spots, but you got to have different ways of getting to your spots. So the only way you're going to be able to understand how that works is to just get out on the floor and play against the best.
Francis Williams, basketball analyst for Root Sports, and on the Blazer broadcast, joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. One more thing on Clingan. I know just making that adjustment and going from coming all the way from UConn, coming out on the West Coast. What is that adjustment period like? Not even from a basketball standpoint, but just kind of a hey, welcome to the pros, kid. Because you see some guys that handle it well, some guys kind of handle it poorly. Everything in between. How do you think that transition is going to be for him?
I think most of the teams have done a really good job of understanding what it takes to get a player acclimated, especially a young player acclimated to their new community. And a lot of the agencies that represent these guys, they do a lot of things to make sure that transition is smooth and they have the things that they need. Now, we heard the story last year about Aiden saying that he didn't have a bed when he got traded here or something like that. Well, I don't know how true that was, but I think that's kind of an anomaly. But I think, and with him being a younger player, I'm pretty sure his family will be involved as well. And he's got a family that obviously lost his mom, but his family will be involved as well. So I think the transition will be smooth for him because the organization and whoever his representation is, they will make sure that all those things are in place for him.
Well, I mean, it is interesting, Francis, because we saw the Blazers drafted Scoot last year, and then Shaden the year before, who was at Kentucky, but didn't really play for Kentucky, and both of those guys came in, and now you draft a college guy, but we're in a new world in college basketball, I'm sure, as you know, because I wonder now that these guys can get paid and you have to deal with the financials, because you hear about that a lot, right? That rookie year, the stress of financials, the stress of money management, and people wanting this. Well, they come in, I think, a little bit with it hitting the ground running because, well, they're already getting paid in college. And I'm sure Clingan had NIL deals and endorsement deals and had an agent and somebody that manages money. That's probably, in terms of just getting from college to the NBA, another step forward is you've already dealt with not all of it because it's going to be a little bit more money now that he's a seventh overall pick. But, that money part of it, I know Scoot talked about it. Like he was already a pro before he came and played for the Blazers.
Yeah, exactly. That's something that is no longer it's nothing new. I mean, they are getting a nice chunk of change from whatever source that they're using in terms of when they're in college, or even if they're not in college. I mean, they're really coming in with that part of the experience. They have had a snapshot of what that's going to be like. So again, the important thing is to just make sure that you have good people around you.
Yeah.
You can't have the hangers on. You can't have your boys running around with you. But now if your boys are solid and your boys got your back and they're all coming in and they're playing a role in doing what you need to be successful, then that's great. But you just got to make sure that you have good, quality people around you.
Francis Williams, basketball analyst for Root Sports, on the Blazer broadcast, joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. Let's talk about Deni Avdija. Comes in 14.9, let's call it 15, but 15 points per game, shoots 37% from three at 6'9". And again, we're kind of seeing this trend, Francis, from what the Blazers have been doing, which is making up for the lack of size that they've had for the last couple of seasons. And another guy that, like you mentioned, every NBA team in the entire league, even the Boston Celtics, every NBA team is looking for a guy who is about 6'9" and can shoot about 37% from three. So I think a real nice addition. What else about Avdija's game do you like?
Well, the first thing I like is that even though he's young, he's proven. He's already proven that he is a solid NBA player. But I think he has the ability to pass the ball. He rebounds, and he seems to play like he's a very intelligent player also. So you're always looking for a guy also that does he make the guys around him better? And I think you put him on the floor with a particular type of guy, and I think he has the ability to uplift the other players as well. But you like that size at the wing position and his ability to shoot the basketball. And he's on a very favorable contract because he comes in making $15 million. By the time the contract is over, he's making around $11 million. And in 4 years, what is $11 million going to look like in the NBA? Not much. So he's going to really be an asset, I believe, from the business side and from the basketball side. I think they hit a home run with that one.
Francis, the second round coming up tonight. So you got the two-day draft, and I understand that there's always the hey, Jokic was a second rounder, and Draymond Green was a second rounder, but those gems are hard to find in this league, especially once you get past the lottery, once you get past certain spots. But do you think in this draft specifically, because from what I have heard and what everybody said is this was a down draft. It was, there's a lot of different options and a lot of different ways teams could go. Do you think there are going to be maybe more opportunities for the Blazers in the second round because the draft was the way it was this year?
There could be. I mean, there were two guys left in the green room. Let's remember that. Johnny Furphy got left in the green room, and Filipowski was still in there too. So those are two guys that at least when the GMs were asked, they thought that they were going to be first round picks. So there's two guys right there that there's probably some quality there. But I think the way specifically to the Blazers, their roster's probably about full right now. Mm-hmm. They may be looking for some two-way guys. They may be looking for and there will be some more movement. We know that before October gets here, there will be some more movement. But with these two picks that they have, I think it's 34 and 40, I think they'll be looking for some guys that maybe can give them some quality where they can kind of stash them, put them in the G League, or if they have a guy that they get from overseas, they can leave him over there. But I think that's what they'll be looking for. But keep an eye on those two because they'll come in with a big chip on their shoulder because they got embarrassed last night.
Francis Williams, Blazers analyst from Root Sports, joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. You mentioned DeAndre Ayton, and we don't need to dive into the air mattress and whether or not DeAndre Ayton has heard of Amazon or not. But I thought it was interesting what Joe Cronin said last night when asked about is DeAndre Ayton going to be a starter? Does he have to go? Is this pick of a 7-footer indicative of the way DeAndre Ayton played? And Joe Cronin talked about competition. And, I was thinking about it, and I even mentioned it on the show. I don't know if DeAndre Ayton, maybe since high school, maybe since middle school, has actually had to battle for a job or battle for a starting spot. I know it got a little dicey there at the end in Phoenix, but from the moment he was at Arizona and the moment he was drafted number 1 and even the moment he stepped into a Blazers uniform, he's been the starting center on almost every team he's ever played on. I think it's an interesting opportunity for a guy like DeAndre Ayton for the first time maybe ever in his basketball career, Francis, to actually have to beat a guy out.
Yeah, I know that there will be competition, but DeAndre Ayton's going to be the starting center on this team. So, but what I say about DA, I think I mentioned this last night. I thought that there was a change in DA about midway through the season. I heard Coach Phillips make a comment about we need to have a focused DA when he's out on the floor, and I thought the last third of the season we got the best of DA. Mm-hmm. And if he plays like that, then that's exactly what anybody would be looking for in their starting center. I thought he was really good that last third of the season before they ended up shutting him down. So if you get that DA, now what you're looking for in Clingan, I think, is he's competing with Robert Williams, and the draft may actually have told us that maybe Robert Williams isn't healthy.
Yeah.
So you've got three guys there in that position that when healthy, Robert Williams is a quality backup in this league, and has been a starter. So you've got three guys there that will be competing. But let's keep it straight. DA will be the starter unless something catastrophic happens, and let's hope that doesn't. And Clingan just gives us some depth and some versatility at that position, and somebody that the younger guys can grow with. I think that's the main emphasis with Clingan, that he can grow with the rest of the young guys as we move into the future.
Speaking of the future, Scoot Henderson going to be heading into year 2. You mentioned it earlier, and you're 100% right. You kind of saw that evolution, and I know that in the NBA and especially in a social media world, Francis, where it's like, all right, this guy's here, and maybe also the fact that Scoot looks like an adult. When he walks into a room, you're like, that guy does not look 19. But he dealt with what I think a lot of rookies deal with. What are you looking for specifically with Scoot? Not really in the offseason, but heading into the early parts of this upcoming season that tell you that his growth is kind of on track of where he needs to be.
Well, I want to see the little improvements in his skill development, where hopefully he has tightened up his handle just a little bit, where it's just a little bit more easy for him to get to the spots because you are playing against the best and against elite athletes. So tighten up that handle a little bit. Decision-making, have the decision-making being improved, and just having a better understanding of his teammates and where his teammates like the ball where they can be successful with it. And those will show growth, that he's understanding himself and understanding the game, and he's doing the things that he has to do to be the face of the franchise and be the point guard on the team. He's understanding what he needs to do to make the guys around him better and give everybody a chance for success. And then also be very honed in and tuned in to the scouting report as it relates to the other teams and the other individuals, just being well-rounded and understanding that this is the responsibility that comes with being the number 3 pick and a guy that is being asked to possibly be the face of a franchise for a long time and be the point guard. A lot of responsibility comes with that, and you're going to have to put that on your shoulders, and you want to see him doing a better job of taking on that responsibility.
Francis Williams, Root Sports, Blazers studio analyst. Hey, Francis, I know it was a long day yesterday. Probably going to be another long day today. Really appreciate you carving out some time and getting up with us this morning. This was fantastic stuff. Have a great rest of the draft. Have a great weekend. We'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Will do. I appreciate you guys having me on. Have a great day, everybody.
There you go, Francis Williams. Set me straight. Like, look, DA's gonna be the starter. All right, no, don't get it all worked up. DA's gonna be the starter, but it is gonna be interesting to see kind of the development of a guy like Donovan Clingan in a sense of, like we saw with Scoot Henderson. He blows by everybody his entire life, right? Scoot Henderson, from the moment he got a basketball in his hands and the moment he got probably hit puberty, it was like, yep, I blow by everybody. That's just what I do. And finally, and everybody deals with it, right? Every player, even Jordan, even Kobe, even LeBron, right? Every player deals with like, all right, I can't just blow by everybody. Now I got to get savvy. I think the key for Clingan, especially, and we see it a lot of times in the summer league with big men, you got to figure out how are you going to protect the rim without fouling, right? That's now again, he might not be playing enough minutes as a rookie to even worry about fouling, but we saw it. I think we saw it with Zach Collins, right?
Yeah, and as a rookie, you're not going to get those calls. Like I remember with Zach Collins,
no calls.
Yeah, like Zach Collins, when we went through that development, it was like, okay, he's showing great instincts, but because he's a rookie, he's still getting those foul calls.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the long and short of how long Zach Collins was in the rotation, but that's not his fault entirely.
He got in the rotation, and then he got the shoulder injury, and then
like
ankle
third
injury.
Game of the year, man. Like anyway, all that to say, yeah, great points by Francis.
But you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think that's going to be the huge thing for a guy like Clingan is how do you be able to play defense and figure it? Now it's going to be a process, right? And again, we're all kind of learning this as a rebuild, right? Yeah, draft night's fun. You look cool in your suit. Hot girlfriends all over the internet, by the way. I don't know if everybody noticed that.
That means he's got some confidence.
He's got. Let's just say, if the money ball is Donovan Clingan, extremely confident. If you know what I'm saying.
He'd pass that check mark in that draft room.
His hot girlfriend's all over the internet. It won't matter what her Instagram looks like today. I'm not going to be the creepazoid that follows her on Instagram, but I'm sure there's a lot of creepos out there that did. But you get the draft, you get your fun suit, hug mom and dad. I saw him he did the selfie, and they're like, hey, Portland. Look, now it's like, all right, how do you figure out how to play defense in the NBA where you're just not bigger than everybody? Like, again, his entire life, just like, yeah, I block shots because I'm bigger than everybody. But again, he mentioned, Francis Williams mentioned Avdija, and it's like, go look at what he did against Portland. I went back and I looked.
How do you do? I don't remember those games specifically.
22 and 12. 22 and 12 against the Blazers.
First game or both games? Or about the same for both games?
When was that? That was April.
Okay, so
the last game, like the fifth to last game of the season. Remember that was the game against the Wizards. The Blazers won.
Yeah,
they're like, oh boy, what's going on here? Yeah, it wasn't because of it wasn't because of Avdija. I keep saying Avdija. It's Avdija. I had it, and then it's Avdija. This I'm twisted up.
We'll get there.
Here's
we'll get
what
there.
I do
We got time.
I'll get it before the next segment. But here's what I do know how to pronounce. Ticket Tuesday. How about that? That one's easy. That's right. Trailblazer Ticket Tuesday, or not Trailblazer, that's going to be a ways away. But Hops, how about that? Ticket Tuesday winning streak here on Rip City Radio. It stays alive with exclusive tickets to the Hillsboro Hops all season long. Make sure you listen to Rip City Drive every Tuesday afternoon for your chance to win and get Hops tickets now at hillsborohops.com. Wrapping up hour number 2 coming up next, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, obviously, a ton of draft stuff going on. Risa Shea goes number 1 overall to the Atlanta Hawks. And then Alex Sarr, he goes 2 overall. A little bit surprised that, was it Reed Shepard go 3? That was a smidge of a surprise, I guess. But you can't be surprised in this draft. You're like, oh, the draft is down. The draft is down. Oh, why are they drafting him there? It's like, you just said the draft was down for like a month and a half, dude. Like, you can't just sit there and be like, oh, this is a down draft. And they're like, why are they drafting this guy? Because you just said the draft was down.
Biggest surprises, I think, were Ron Holland at 5 with the Pistons. And then, again, I'm going to...
Zach Edey at 9.
Edey at 9.
Huge.
And then, Salon, I couldn't do the first name, to the Hornets right before the Blazers took Clingan. So those are the surprises for sure.
And I think maybe Connect falling all the way to 17 because a lot of people thought he was a top 10 guy. I know the Blazers were pretty high on him. So other news and notes going on around the NBA. OG Anunoby just got a bag.
Remember when you said a couple days ago, you're like, what if he leaves? And I said, Justin, he ain't walking out of the Big Apple. And that's
he got a big old bite out of that Big Apple because he just got a massive deal. He must have had options. Maybe I've been wrong on OG Anunoby. Because remember, like 3 years ago, it was just all Blazer fans could talk about. It was like, oh, it's OG Anunoby. And I'm just like, I don't get it. I still don't get it, but
I think the Knicks were like 22-3 with him in the starting lineup this year.
Yeah.
So like that helped. That'll get you paid, Justin.
But they got a lot of depth and they got a lot of payroll going on in New York. So that was the big news. And then, all right, so this Kevin Durant thing. Rumors persisted about Kevin Durant and whether or not I think Stephen A. Smith came out on his podcast and was like, from what I am hearing, that's what Stephen A. Smith says, is that the Suns want out of Kevin Durant. And so much so that Ishbia, the owner, he had to throw a tweet out there. Is it Matt Ishbia, I think? Matt Ishbia, the owner of the Suns, like, we are committed to Kevin Durant. We are committed to winning a championship with Kevin Durant. Two things this reminded me of, which I don't think sound very good for Phoenix or for Kevin Durant. And Brenden, you might not be at this age yet, but there will come a time where you'll get on a social media and you'll be like, that couple puts too much out there about how much they love each other.
Oh, I feel that way already, Justin, about some of my friends that
and you're like, I know what's going on. Like, doesn't that feel like, every Valentine's Day, I am so lucky, my loving husband. Like, they're about a year and a half away from a divorce. Like,
not even on Valentine's Day, just a random Friday. Oh, I have the best husband or wife.
It's like, that's not what you said when we were out having drinks the other night. Yeah. Like, you didn't say that, but you put that out there. We are so lucky. That's what the and the other one that it reminded me of, the vote of confidence from like an athletic director on a football coach. So-and-so is our coach. We have we are fully committed and giving coach the resources. But yeah,
I think 2 weeks before they parted ways, Oregon State said they were all in on Gary Anderson still, despite all the struggles.
100%.
So I think
it always happens.
Maybe it's 3 weeks, but
if
still.
An athletic director comes out and gives the vote of confidence to a coach, it's bad.
Yeah,
that's a bad scene. And
I support him 100%.
Doesn't that feel like what Matt Ishbia is doing? Is like
You're trying to push this Kevin Durant thing. I know, and I don't mean that negatively. I'm just even early in the week, you're like, what if Durant? You believe it's more possible than I do, and
here's where I get interested.
Yeah, go ahead, go for it.
Clearly, a rumor came from somewhere.
Rumors don't just get started out of nothing.
And now we're on the day after the draft, and First Take is still talking about Kevin Durant possibly being traded, right? Not a real trade like the Blazers just did. Now, they wouldn't talk about Malcolm Brogdon. Not the draft. It was a weak draft. But day 3 of so-and-so's looking at Kevin Durant. So-and-so, Kevin Durant want out. What would you trade for Kevin Durant? We're on day 3. This is the day after the draft. So, is this... Do they know something we don't know? Or... The other thing is this I know how the content machine works. And, you get a smidge of news. You get a little nugget, right? You get a little morsel. I'm like, all right. And then you can kind of create your own news cycle by, well, how would you react? What if? What would it take? Should they? Oh, what? And then Ishbia puts out a tweet. You're like, but what does this say? I don't know. So those are the two options. It's either a big, giant game of telephone. Did you ever play telephone?
Totally,
yeah.
man.
Big, giant game of telephone.
Usually in class, teacher wanted to tell us how things get disseminated and changed. A good lesson.
Yeah, it's always a good lesson to learn. Nobody ever learned it, though.
No.
Social media came along. You're like, I've heard that.
I remember being the kid who in the middle of it would totally change it just to be that
Of course
kid.
you would. Of course you would. The world zigs and Brenden thinks, how can I zag? That's just how,
Not entirely inaccurate. But yeah, I remember it'd be like, Josh has a green shirt. And then like halfway along, it's like, Josh has big feet or something like, you know what I mean? Just something so small, but it just gets changed amongst people and then it's believed.
So, all that being said, again, if I had to guess, knowing nothing of the Phoenix Suns and nothing of billionaire Matt Ishbia, I think the tweet he put out there was essentially, you want Kevin Durant, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost, that's the guy with his pancakes going like, I'm thinking about trading Kevin Durant.
Thinking about moving off Durant. You're my first call.
But it's going to cost you a boatload of picks and a whole lot more than just what you are offering. That's what I think it was. But it very much, it did. It reminded, like, we are so committed to Kevin. We are so, I don't know where this came from. We love Kevin Durant. We love him so much. This feels very much like couple who is not doing well and is just putting all of the social media memes, GIFs, like, yeah, they're not doing well. They're not doing well at all. Because you know what couples who are doing well don't have to do? Tell the world about it.
Oh, 100%.
Don't have to. Don't need to. But, yeah, like you said, it's one thing like anniversary, Valentine's Day, birthday, Father's Day, Mother's Day, all that. It's like, random Tuesday. I am so lucky. It's like, all right, that's an audience of one right there. Because you know why? Like, you know why people do that when you're in a relationship. And, yeah, you want to present it. But you're also maybe trying to show the other person, like, hey, I'm trying here. Ishbia is, I think, trying to, because I think Kevin Durant is disgruntled. Why? Why do I think that? Because he's always been disgruntled.
Is that better?
He's never been gruntled. He's been gruntled once. He won the MVP of the finals. And then he got mad the next year.
He was
trying to fight Draymond in the huddle.
Yeah, he was gruntled until Draymond came after him.
He's been disgruntled his entire career.
Bus rider, not the bus driver.
So I think he is in a bit of a way with his feelings. And I think Ishbia is like, no, Kev, we love you. Look at this tweet I'm sending out. We love you. We're so lucky to have you. Please don't. It's going to cost you, though. So there you go. There's news around the NBA. More draft reaction. Sean Highkin, RCM mailbag. Jam-packed hour 3. Next, 620 Rip City Radio. It is 8 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Justin Myers with you. Big day for the Blazers, and it started off with a trade as they send Malcolm Brogdon and the 14th pick in yesterday's first round to the Washington Wizards for forward Deni Avdija. Nailed it. Also included was a 2029 first rounder for the Wizards and Blazers 2029 first to the Wizards, also 2 future seconds. Then the draft was underway, and with the 7th pick in the first round of the 2024 draft, the Blazers select UConn center Donovan Clingan. Welcome to the West Coast, Clingan, as he is on his way out to the Great Pacific Northwest. Round 2 gets underway this afternoon. Blazers have the 34th and 40th pick. Coming up in about 20 minutes, Sean Highkin of the Rose Garden Report is going to be joining us to talk about the picks and the moves the Blazers made and what potentially is coming down the pike. Hour 3 starts right now on 620 Rip City Radio. Hey, welcome back to Rip City Mornings, everybody. How we feeling today, Portland? How we feeling? It's an interesting spot that the Blazers are in this year as opposed to where they were in just a year ago, right? Because a year ago, if we're all being honest, a year ago, yeah, there was some excitement about Scoot Henderson. But there was also, I think, some anxiety. And it was probably more than anxiety, it was nervousness. Because there's a difference, right? And now, first off, let me be clear. I am not a doctor. I have no business diagnosing. Take no medical or health advice from me. Other than vegetables are good, you should have some. But I'm not a doctor. But, like, the difference between nervousness and anxiety is that nervousness, there's a reason. Anxiety is kind of that anxious feeling, but there is no reason for it. That's why people get anxious. They're like, well, why are you so nervous? I'm not. I'm just anxious. Nervousness is you're standing on top of a 12-story building looking over the edge. You get that feeling in the pit of your stomach. You're like, that's not anxiousness. That's nervousness. You're nervous. You might trip. You might fall and plunge to your death. It's a healthy way to keep yourself alive. And I think last year, after Scoot Henderson was picked and people were excited, and obviously it was I remember kind of the excitement of like, whoa, Charlotte really did take Brandon Miller at number 2, didn't they? And Scoot fell to the Blazers. But in the end, there was the nervousness because I think everybody knew. Dame said no more 19-year-olds. He said it. And I think if we go back to a year ago, because correct me if I'm wrong, Brendan, I might be wrong on this, and it also might change, but there were still a lot of people after the Blazers took Scoot at 3 a year ago, and we were like, all right, they still might trade that pick. Maybe they're going to shop it. And then like the night continued to go on. It's like, no, they're not moving. Who knows? Well, keep an eye on it. It's a covenant, and then no. Not only do they not, it's the night has ended, the draft is wrapped up. Scoot's on his way to Portland. Like they're not trading, and I think that's when the nervousness kind of set in. That like, oh no, the big move that we thought might be coming. Because remember we were talking about just a year ago. Like, is New Orleans going to move on from Zion? I think there was Pascal Siakam talk. There was OG Anunoby talk. There was the Blazers going to trade that number 3 pick. And it's like, nope, they're going to keep him. And that's when I think the nervousness set in, which was, oh boy, is Dame going to ask for a trade? Let's not talk. A week later, he would ask for a trade.
To Miami, but that's not where he went.
Did not go there. He would go to Milwaukee. You guys all know that. You've watched this. You watched the TV.
Turns out, though, that
he would go to Milwaukee. That trade would then end up bringing Drew Holiday here for a hot minute. He would then be traded to Boston. Boston would send Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, and a 14th pick. Malcolm Brogdon, that 14th pick, were traded. And ultimately, and you can't really do it in the aggregate. I think I'm using that correctly. Deni Avdija, and Robert Williams for Damian Lillard. Now, it's not entirely how it worked because, again, I've said it multiple times. You traded Dame for Scoot. That's what you did. But I think that's where maybe some Blazer fans are a little frustrated that way.
And the fact that
sure, it's nice to get a 14-point-a-night guy for Malcolm Brogdon, but you gave up a 14th overall pick. Well, that pick was part of the Dame deal. Brogdon was part of the Dame deal. And it was, I think, even still like, well, if we're going to trade away the best player and everybody's favorite player, why don't we get one of these Rudy Gobert deals? Well, it just never came to fruition.
Make no mistake, though, Justin, I think kind of going back to Fentress's point that he made with Joe Cronin in that first clip we played back in the first hour was, DeAndre Ayton was the prized piece of the Dame trade. And now you draft someone who is probably going to take his place at some point. That kind of negates the value of what you got for DeAndre. So that's where that perspective is from, I think. Yeah, a little bit, but at the same token,
but it's roster building. You know what I mean? Roster building's it's a nasty business, and anybody that thought that you were going to be able to get like this Oklahoma City got a haul for Paul George, and Houston or Brooklyn got a haul for Kevin Durant, but part of the roster building is the constant movement and everything else. But the reason why I brought up a year ago is because it was a different feeling a year ago. And I know it's not all puppy dogs and rainbows, and I'm not going to sit here and try to sell you Donovan Clingan is going to be, he's going to be this or he's going to be that. We don't know what he's going to be. But there seems to be less stress. Because I think there is, for the first time in a while, the day after a draft, a realistic idea of where this organization is. We weren't at a realistic place last year because even the day after the draft, it was like, all right, well, maybe Scoot and Dame can play together. They can't. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe Ant, Scoot, Shaden, and Dame. Remember, all those guys were on the roster at one point last year. Maybe they can all play together. And then they can go to the playoffs and we can get back to doing the fun stuff in May instead of ping pong ball anxiety or nervousness, I should say. But I feel like for the first time the day after the draft in a long, long time, Blazer fans are kind of realistic as to what this team is. I think this team's better than it was yesterday, which is good. I think Clingan is a good pick. But you're also not at the mercy of the draft and you're not at the mercy of the lottery. No, but like will you play the Cronin clip again talking about Scoot and Shaden and how they're committed to Scoot and Shaden? Because I do think it adds to kind of the ease of today for a lot of Blazer fans. Here's Joe Cronin yesterday talking about the continued roster building of this team.
We're committed to Scoot and Shaden being a massive part of what we're doing, and how do we find ways to, give them the support they need and make them better and maximize their development. So it's continually seeking players that we can add to this roster that we can grow with and build together with.
Committed to Scoot and Shaden. That's who the Blazers are committed to. That is their everything else is now centered around those two guys. As it should be, by the way. You tanked for both of them. You should. You should be building around both of them because you lost a lot of games on purpose with Damian Lillard on your roster to get those two guys. And so I think adding Clingan, nice piece, but nobody went into this draft going like, yep, the Blazers absolutely have to hit a home run here. They're hopeful. They've made contact, balls in the air. Is it a home run or is it a warning track shot with Scoot and Shaden? We don't know yet. Ball's still up in the air. Weird analogy, but you see what I'm saying.
I think it's solid.
You see what I'm saying?
So I just before said the more, the not so rosy outlook, Justin. You could also play the way rosy outlook and put on my red-colored Blazer glasses here for a moment and just live with me like this if you're dreaming of a Blazer fan of the future. 2 years ago, you took Shaden Sharp. Regardless of everything else, there was a lot of consensus. If he played at Kentucky, no chance that guy falls to 7. Okay? So
yes,
that's one.
Very true.
Then we go to Scoot. Everyone goes, oh, if it wasn't for Wemby, Scoot is number 1 in this draft. Then you go to Clingan, who I get Clingan wasn't going to go number 1. There were a lot of people who thought Clingan was third best player in this draft. So they drafted great value each of the last 3 picks.
Have you ever heard, and please understand, I didn't come up with this term, listening audience. This is on the internet. Have you ever heard of the term girl math?
I don't think so, actually.
It's basically like, oh, well, if I have cash and I spend it, that doesn't count because that's not money coming out of my account. Or if I buy something and I take it back to the store and I get store credit, well, then that's free. It's called girl math. What's funny is my wife calls what I do Justin math, which is, like, well, we would have done this, this, and this, so really we're saving money. And it's like, yeah, that's your weird Justin math. So what you're doing here is you're doing Brenden math with the picks. So if I do Brendan's NBA math, what you're saying is that the Blazers now have a top 3, a number 1 overall, and a top 3.
Probably. I mean, there's a case to be made, right? So
and DeAndre Ayton, who was the number 1. So what the Blazers have actively on their roster is the number 1 overall caliber in Scoot Henderson. Number 3 on the big board, Clingan was. And if you redraft from 2 years ago,
Shaden probably goes 4th, if I would guess. 4th or 5th.
That's pretty solid drafts right there.
I mean, not bad.
If you do the Brenden math to it.
I said it's a little rosy colored, but hey, you can look at the positive.
No, look, we're all about puppy dogs and rainbows today. Like, nobody's got time to be all sour and bitter.
Then that, Brenden math. There you go.
It's the Brenden draft math, which is...
You got high value the last 3 years, and, who knows?
Now, we'll see, because in a couple years, they will... Here's what's going to happen. In about 2 years, there will be very long... off-season think piece articles written on Substack about redrafting the 24 draft, right? And we'll see, where will Donovan Clingan be? Hopefully he's near the top of that. But Risache to Sarr to Shepard to Salon to Castle to Clingan to all the way down to it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Connect. At number 17, all the way, because that Bronny's getting drafted later this afternoon. He's getting drafted later this afternoon. There shall be a very long think piece in our future of hey, remember the 2024? I mean, we still do it with Rudy Gobert, C.J. McCollum, Giannis draft. We still do it. This will be one of them. But I think there is an ease from Blazer fans today. The hay's kind of in the barn in terms of guys you're building around. Joe Cronin said it. It's Scoot and it's Shaden. Hopefully Clingan's one of those guys.
My thing to watch for today, too, Justin, is, again, I know we've kind of said the second-round picks are more likely to be remixed this season. But, again, as Francis Williams mentioned, there's a couple guys who were green room guys.
Filipowski was in the green room?
Yeah.
I know that. I've heard of that guy.
I'm not saying the Blazers are going to draft him. They're big, but they've got, the third pick in the second round. So still could be somebody who's kind of borderline first, and you never know. So I'm going to be excited to see that, and definitely caught off guard by the 1 o'clock draft, Justin. That's pretty early.
Well, apparently there's something going on tonight. I don't know. I'm not aware. It's not on my algorithm, but I guess
the Bear, right?
There's something. Oh, yeah, I got to watch
it's
the Bear tonight.
Man.
We have got to talk to Sean Highkin. Rose Garden Report joins us next, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, after the dust was settled yesterday, the Blazers came away with two new players. One drafted out of UConn, one traded for from the Washington Wizards. Joining us now to talk about the day that Joe Cronin had yesterday and taking a look forward for the Blazers to the second round this afternoon and beyond. From the Rose Garden Report, Sean Heikenback on the Big Show. Good morning, Sean. How are we doing?
Doing all right, Justin. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. I want to go to a tweet you sent out last night and your story that you have of the Rose Garden Report right now, because I am a big fan of, like, let's boil this down to the lowest common denominator. Let's get right down to it, and I thought you summed it up very succinctly in the tweet, which is, the Blazers need good basketball players, and they need basketball players that fit their timeline, and they did that yesterday. Like, let's not complicate it. They need good basketball players who fit their timeline, and they seem to do that yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, they entered the night with two lottery picks. They used one of them, obviously number 7 overall, taking Donovan Clingan, and then they used the other one as part of a trade along with Malcolm Brogdon to Washington to bring in Deni Avdija. So they entered the night with 2 draft picks. They came out with 2, what I would pretty definitively describe as good basketball players who fit their timeline. So I would say mission accomplished.
All right, so let's talk about Clingan. This draft was an interesting one, Sean, because obviously a lot of unknowns. And a lot of international players, and a lot of people saying this was a down draft. I mean, when you hear like top 3 guys being described in comps as role players or 3-and-D guys is always interesting. But it felt like the Blazers had Clingan very, very high on their draft board. I know that Blazer fans were frustrated when the ping pong balls fell to 7, but it feels like even if they would have been there at 3, Clingan was the guy they were coveting, right?
I think it's very possible they would have taken him in the top 3. And again, I mean, to your point, I'll tell you this. I think I said this when I was on with you after the lottery a month ago or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I was in Chicago for the lottery, and they fell from 4 to 7. They had the 4th highest odds with the number 1 pick. The 3 teams jumped them, and they ended up with the 7th pick. I saw Joe like right after they let us out of the sequestered lottery room, and I did not get the sense that he was particularly broken up about falling back 3 spots in this draft. Like, this is not a you remember that. In that famous clip of them showing the lottery on TV in 2003, and the late Jerry West, now was the GM of the Grizzlies at the time, and he was the on-stage representative, and they were announced as having the number 2 pick and having just missed out on LeBron, and you saw his face. Yeah. Have you ever seen that clip? So in some drafts, teams that don't do well in the lottery, like, that's their reaction. When I talked to the Blazers front office people in Chicago about a whole week about falling back in the lottery, they basically, at least, I mean, maybe they were just projecting that, that everything was fine, but they were just like, we're fine. They were pretty confident they could get someone they really liked at 7. And, it was never a guarantee that it was going to break the way it did for them, where somebody that they had Joe wouldn't say last night exactly where Donovan Clingan ranked on their board, because he said he didn't want to put added pressure on the kid, which to me means they probably had him 1 or 2. If he said it like that, if he said, I don't want to say how high we ranked him because it would put more pressure on him, that, like, to me, that's kind of a tell. And so I don't think they thought it was a guarantee that a guy that they had ranked, let's just say number 1 or 2 on their board, was going to be there at 7. And a couple of teams, Memphis in particular, really tried hard to move up to 3 with Houston, or 5 with Detroit, or 6 with Charlotte, and jump them to take Clingan. And they were unable to do it. And so, it just so happened that they didn't have to give up anything to move up to get the guy that they wanted, and they got the guy they wanted at number 7. So I would say they're pretty happy with how things worked out. And I mean, look, Clingan it's going to be real interesting to see how the DeAndre Ayton thing works out, or, with Rob Williams if he's healthy, because they have, established starting caliber centers already. But Clingan has a pretty high floor. Like, they're not, like, it's pretty hard to project that Donovan Clingan is going to be a bust. You kind of know what he is in the NBA. You know that he's probably going to be good at it. So I think they're pretty happy with how things worked out.
Sean Highkin from the Rose Garden Report joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because this is a silly question alert, but I asked silly questions, Sean, because you've talked about the Blazers have liked him and he was high on their board. I'll be honest, confession, like, I watched the NCAA tournament. I watched Pac-12, RIP, basketball, but I can't say that I've watched a ton of film on Clingan. I knew who he was because his name sounded like Klingon, which I thought was kind of funny. And then I watched him win back-to-back national championships. What about him did the Blazers like? Was it just the length? Was it just the physicality? I know they talked about rim protection. What specifically do you think was the things about his game that the Blazers were really high on?
Well, the rim protection, I think, is the big thing. They were the second worst rim protecting team in the league last year behind Washington. And so if you can draft one of the best rim protectors in college basketball history, that's probably a pretty good way to solve that problem. And, especially – and I realize this is all just kind of GM speak, but, when you talk about Joe always talking about, and he said this again last night, wanting to build a culture and wanting to, just kind of put young guys in a good environment, bringing in a guy who has, I would say, probably won more than, even though he hasn't been in the NBA yet, he's won more than just about anybody on this Blazers team right now. He's won two national championships at UConn, and he won, I believe, his junior and senior year of high school, both. He won state championships. So bringing in a guy who has played on winning teams that are actually playing for something at a high level, while also filling an exact need that they have with rim protection. And I think that's just, they felt like that was just kind of too good to pass up.
All right, let's again, I'll preface this by writing it in pencil, not in pen, because who knows moving forward. But what happens with DeAndre Ayton here? I know that Cronin said yesterday, said last night, like, this wasn't an indictment on DeAndre Ayton. They were not drafting to replace DeAndre Ayton, that they're not good enough to worry about positions. But now you've got a spot where you've got Ayton, you've got Clingan, you've got Williams, Duop Reith is still on the roster, and you owe DeAndre Ayton $35 million the next 2 years. What do you think ultimately happens here with him?
I think they are comfortable moving forward right now with DeAndre Ayton as their starting center. The thing you have to keep in mind, even a rookie that's as polished as Donovan Clingan might be, like, is a guy really going to be able to step in and be a starter and play 35 minutes a game as a rookie, especially at that position where it takes rookie big men to, a while to learn at the NBA level? Probably not. So I don't think it was where we drafted this guy and then we decided to, we're going to just immediately trade DeAndre Ayton to give this guy the keys. I don't think that was their philosophy. I think, they maybe long term they view him as their starter, and that's why they took him in the top 10. But I don't think it was an immediate draft this guy, and now they're looking immediately to ship DeAndre Ayton out. If Donovan Clingan comes off, I mean, think about what happened with Scoot Henderson last year. Obviously, Scoot was a much more raw prospect than Clingan is, but it took a while for him to come around, and this is a guy that was talked about as like, this is a generational point guard prospect and a franchise level guy. Think about how bad the first half of, he came around at the end of the season, and they're very excited about him now, but think about how rough the first half or 2/3 of the season was before he kind of started to put it together. Like, rookies, unless it's like LeBron or Wemby or especially the younger guys, and Donovan Clingan isn't 19, but he's 20. He played 2 years in college. He wasn't a one and done guy, but it's just like it's just rookies take time to kind of learn in the NBA and figure it out, and so I don't think it's this guy is immediately going to be starting over DeAndre Ayton. I do think that if they can get any kind of positive value for Robert Williams with his health history, they should probably do that. But I don't think the Ayton thing is really as pressing as it's kind of made out to be.
Sean Eichen of the Rose Garden Report joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. Let's get to the other move that was made. I'll be honest, Sean, I was running some errands before I got home to watch the draft. Had to Google Deni Avdija in the Safeway parking lot. So did that, and I saw, hey, 15 points a game, 37% from three, 6'9", crazy affordable deal. So here's my question. Feels like everybody in the NBA is looking for 6'9" guys that can shoot who are on affordable contracts. Why were the Wizards looking to move this guy?
They are in the middle of a new front office regime, complete changeover, and they're trying to just completely strip it down to the studs and get rid of any good players that they have so that they can lose as many games as possible to try to get Super Flag. That's my understanding of it. Now, this is, and I would imagine that poor Malcolm Brogdon, by the way, if he ends up staying in Washington after having had the good soldier rebuilding year last year in Portland, coming off of playing for Boston the year before that, that's tough. But this is the kind of going back to the trade deadline when they were fielding offers for whether it was Malcolm Brogdon, who ended up being in this trade, or Jeremy Grant or Matisse Thybulle or whoever, I never got the sense that they were just looking to stockpile as many draft picks as possible. They wanted their priority when they were looking to trade any of their guys was they're looking to bring in, and you kind of saw this even with the Dame trade, where they got a few draft picks, but the main pieces that came back that are really worth talking about were DeAndre Ayton and Toumani Camara. And Robert Williams, if he had been healthy, would have kind of been in this category as well. But they are looking to add players that make sense with the players that they already have that they're doing the rebuild with. And I think Deni Avdija, like you said, being a 23-year-old, 6'9" two-way wing who's on a really good contract, I think, when one of those guys comes available, you prioritize that in a return for a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, who you're going to have to trade anyway, over just let's try to get more first-round picks.
Real quick, I know that also the move with Brogdon heading out to Washington and the deal that Avdija's got not only a deal, but a deal that comes down in years, right? I think he goes from 14 down, which is a unique spot to be in. And it brings the Blazers under the luxury tax. If you could, not for me, Sean, but for the listening audience, if you could, what does that do? What benefits does that bring other than just writing a check when you're not winning very many games? But what benefits does that bring of being under the luxury tax? Because I saw that a lot yesterday of this move now brings them under the luxury tax. What kind of benefits does that have?
Well, with the new CBA, there's actually a lot of benefits to it, and it's actually kind of something that we're still seeing the full effects of, and it really feels like the owners got as close as they're ever going to be able to get to a hard cap that they've been trying to put in for 30 years that they haven't been able to get the players to sign off on. It seems like they almost have been able to do that because it's so punitive now to be – I mean, there are different rules for, because there's the luxury tax number, and then there's the what's called the first apron, which is $7 to $8 million above that. And then there's the second apron, which is I think 10 million above that. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but if you're over the first apron, there are some restrictions for what, certain types of moves you're allowed to make in terms of, you can't take back more than you send out in salary, or you can't, there's different stuff. And then the second apron is especially you can't trade multiple players for one player in a trade. And they freeze your draft pick at the end of the first round, or at the end of the first round, or you can't like there's all these rules. Like you can do, like I think you lose all of your mid-level exceptions entirely if you're above the second apron. It's just it basically make it so that if your payroll is to that level, your entire team, you have to basically be like, have your team built like what Phoenix was last year, where it's 3 guys on max deals and then the rest of your roster is veteran minimum guys. So like they're kind of trying to make it so that teams like Phoenix or the Warriors or the Clippers or some of these big market teams can't just like stockpile superstars and their owners are willing to pay the luxury tax and they can just do whatever they want. I think it's going to eventually. I'll be really interested to see how it works for a team like Oklahoma City or Minnesota, which are, small market teams that drafted their guys and built quote unquote the right way. Now it's going to be really expensive for those teams to keep all their guys together and pay them without having to trade somebody. But yeah, like if you're a team and if you're a team like in the position of like a Oklahoma City or a Minnesota where you're a contender and you're trying to win, then yeah, it's a good problem to have, having to not be able to pay somebody because you're too good and you have too many guys you have to pay. Having to deal with those restrictions as well as the amount of money you're spending when you're in a team's position like the Blazers, where it's going to be several years probably before you're back in the playoffs, is not really where anybody wanted to be. And frankly, I thought it was a little bit funny how many people I saw, on my mentions or, from, reader emails or wherever else, forums, all, the kind of stuff you look at online, how many people were like panicking about the luxury tax and, how like they're paying the luxury tax for a rebuilding team. They just made one move an hour before the draft that got rid of that problem. So that's kind of what that was about.
Sean Eichen from the Rose Garden Report joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. One last thing before we let you go, Sean. You tweeted it out. We've played the clip this morning a handful of times, but Joe Cronin, maybe a telling statement, maybe just a different way of phrasing, but at the end of his press conference said, we continue to build the talent base. We're committed to Scoot and Shaden. Those are the only 2 players that he mentioned. And then it went on to talk about surrounding those 2 guys with players that are capable of building and improving, using a lot of rebuilding, improving, getting better terminology, which I thought was interesting. And I know Anthony Simons is the first player you think of. Like, what does that mean? He didn't say Anthony Simons, but also, Sean, I think of Jeremy Grant. I think of Matisse Thybulle. I think of, these veterans that kind of have their established spot in the NBA. Are we going to see maybe a bunch more big moves this summer for the Blazers?
I think it's on the table. I will say I had the same reaction, and that's why I tweeted the quote out. When Joe said we're committed to Scoot and Shaden and didn't mention Ant, like my eyes like bugged out in the moment when I was like, oh, that's interesting. And, it also just goes back to Ant at his exit interview a couple months ago saying that he's tired of losing and he wants to, be on a winning team. And obviously that's not what the Blazers are right now or are probably going to be in the next couple of years. So I think it makes a lot of sense from both sides if they're really committed to Scoot and Shaden as their starting backcourt. Like I've said since the end of the season that the Ant thing makes sense to look at and, at least be open to the possibility. I think the same thing is true with Jeremy Grant. If they want to keep him for at least the next half a year or a year, like it's not the end of the world, but all of these guys, Malcolm Brogdon was the one they absolutely, I think, had to move in, by the middle of July because it just made no sense for him to still be on the team. And they did that, and they got a player that much better fits their timeline for him. So that was the most important guy that they absolutely needed to move, and they did. But the rest of the guys, the ones that you mentioned, Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simons, Matisse Thybulle, Robert Williams, if there's a market for him with his injury situation, you got to look at it. Like you have to be open to all this stuff, and that doesn't mean you should just be like looking to give these guys away. Brogdon was the most pressing guy to move. All these other guys are under contract for a while, so you can wait for a better deal, but you shouldn't be closed off to moving any of those guys, I would say.
You need to be subscribed to the Rose Garden Report, rosegardenreport.com. You can follow Sean on Twitter at Hyken. There's a GH in there. Hey, Sean, thanks so much for your time. I know it was a long day yesterday, and the draft continues today. But thanks for getting up. Thanks for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Good to talk to you, Justin.
There you go. Sean Hyken of the Rose Garden Report. We have got the RCM mailbag to wrap up the big show next, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, time to wrap up the big show. Before we get to the RCM mailbag, what are you doing on Saturday? Well, if you're anywhere near Southwest Boones Ferry Road in Wilsonville, it's the Fred Meyer right there. Come help out Toyota and us here at iHeartRadio. Fill the truck with canned and non-perishable foods benefiting the Oregon Food Bank. Just look for the specially marked Toyota Tundra there at the Fred Meyer in Wilsonville. While you're there, enter to win a trip for two to the iHeartRadio Music Festival in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. Join us at Fred Meyer as we fill the truck for Toyota and the Oregon Food Bank. All right, fantastic draft recap today, but we still must do a mailbag. So let's fire it up. RCM mailbag style. Can I reverse mailbag you real quick?
Sure.
What would be worse? Being one of the two players in the green room not selected night one, having to walk of shame it back to the hotel. It would take off your suit.
Yeah, it's bad.
Do you go back to the green? That or being like Zach Edey, I don't know if he was there or not, but like thinking I'm going to be a second rounder, there's no way I'm going, and then getting drafted in the top 10 and missing your chance to walk out on the stage with the hat and the jersey. Which one's worse?
Without a doubt, the first one.
First one's worse?
Yeah, without a doubt. You go back to like Aaron Rodgers when he fell, right? The NFL, I think, makes it worse than the NBA because
it takes so long.
Right. But like,
those picks were coming fast last night. I appreciated the speed. Like, let's go back to the commissioner. Let's go back to the commissioner. Let's go back. I was like, I love it. Let's go. Move it along.
Now, I'll say this, too.
But that's got to stink, though, if you think you're like, oh, I'm a second rounder.
Right.
Like, no. Top 10.
Only other time.
Could have had an interview and a suit and a.
Only other time I'll mention this today, Justin.
Internet could have been trolling your hot girlfriend.
But, like, I think back to, like, it's one of the few things that I think, Justin, they got realistic in the movie Draft Day is when P. Diddy tells Bo Callahan, it's the NFL draft. As he's storming out the thing, he's like, what is going on? And it's like, top pick, and now we're at, 8, and you're still not there. So I think and that's only, like, the fact that it went the entire first round, and Filipowski is the biggest name, the kid from Duke. Remember, Justin, crowdstorming hurt him this year. So
that's right.
I don't know.
Maybe that's why you fell out, because they're like, well, a little crowd,
I don't know. I don't know, but I don't know. Because remember, he got a little dinged up on that play.
I know. And then
maybe it was
John Shire had.
Maybe it was the whole, hey, this guy gets rattled by a few guys on the court kind of a thing. So
I don't think it was that. I think it was other things.
It's just other things.
But
all that to say, it's going to be. I'd say it's definitely worse to be in the green room, sit through all 30 picks,
and then like you get in like the cab and they go like, "Hey, congratulations! Where are you playing next year?" Like,
I don't know. Yeah, the suit. I'd probably take off the jacket and throw in the suit
and on a sweatsuit or something.
It would not be good. I'd be like, I'm gonna watch second round for my hotel room.
It's also gonna stink though. I think about like if you like, you're gonna be a second rounder. Don't worry about it. You don't need to go. And like, oh no, you're in the top 10, Zach. Congratulations.
I'd like to say with that, Justin, notice how Bronny James, not in attendance last night. That's not coincidence to me at all.
Yeah.
It's like he wouldn't have wanted to. Imagine if Bronny was in the draft room with Filipowski, what that image would have been if they go, yep, Bronny's still in the green room. That would have been like the worst image for him and LeBron they could imagine. So, of course, they kept Bronny a million miles away from that. All right, let's go ahead and get into the mailbag itself. Justin, a very important philosophical question here.
Got it. Let's wax philosophic.
When it comes to food.
I am philosophical about food.
Where do you think salad bars are? Overrated, properly rated, or underrated? And why?
I'm going to say that a salad bar is properly rated. It is exactly what you want it to be. It's no more, no less. Now, I've been to some salad bars that are terrible.
Yes.
I'm thinking just your average run of the, not buffet, not like the salad bars that have the hot stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Just, you go to like a Whole Foods or you go to
a pizza place that has a salad bar.
Bar. They got bacon bits. They got 4 or 5 different kinds of dressing. some sort of protein.
Lettuce, carrots,
It's
baby corns.
It's properly rated. It's exactly what you want it to be. Like I don't go in with high expectations to the salad bar, and my expectations are usually met. It's a salad bar.
Why do you think the salad bars took the biggest L during COVID?
Well, because we you want me to be honest?
Because we've always had a sneeze guard. We've always had people who have been, I'm not going to say, but it just seemed really odd to me that, like, COVID, because of what it was, all right, goodbye salad bars, goodbye buffets. Like, that just seemed like a very...
some buffets are coming back. I think...
Radical
I'm
response.
I'm not an economist. I've said that multiple times. I'm a talk show host. But I think they realized the business model for a salad bar or a buffet, for that matter. Wait. We're going to put out a bunch of food that people might eat. And if they don't, we have to throw it away. Wink, wink. That doesn't. Nope. COVID shut it down. Are we ever putting it back out there? No, we're not. Fancy Coffee Friday is tomorrow, right? And I go to Starbucks.
Get my order.
When I go to Starbucks, I get I get a coffee with cream. That's what I want. Now, in the pre-COVID years, Brenden, I used to just be able to put the cream in the coffee myself. They don't have you do that anymore. Why? Because I think they learned that at the end of the day, you can't put the old cream that's been sitting out back in. You have to dump it out and take that, times that by how many thousands of stores. Your dairy budget probably is massively improved. Yeah. And for that, I don't get to put the cream in the coffee myself, which I loved, and I don't get to do anymore. I think it's the same thing about salad bars and buffets. It's like, wait, we cook a bunch of food. Is everybody going to eat all of this? No. Is everybody even going to pay for it? Not really. So some stuff we're going to cook, and it's going to sit there, and then we're going to throw it away. That's not a very good business model, and I think that's probably what happened. Again, not an economist.
But to that point, I think of a place like Sweet Tomatoes, Justin, that barely shaved. I mean, they avoided...
Never been to a Sweet Tomatoes.
Oh, really?
Drive past one to Costco all the time. Never been to one.
An insane salad bar, man. Insane salad bar. It was so...
Is that all they do is salad bar?
Now, I believe only one survived COVID. They were, something like 20, 30 locations and all the way down to one. But again, it was like a full salad bar.
Did you guys ever have Izzy's?
Oh, yeah.
Izzy's salad bar was
to die
clutch.
For. It was to die for.
So clutch.
Absolutely.
Sizzler also, the Sizzler old school salad bar, but it also had a taco bar, so it was more of a buffet.
Steak, seafood, Sizzler.
Sizzler salad bar, Izzy's salad bar. I mean,
now I'm gonna be mean.
Cream of the crop. I'll die on this hill.
Justin, it's kind of funny how generationally, like, you were like the 4th or 5th Gen Xer who's like, oh yeah, Sizzler, dude. When I was like, Sizzler was the best. And I'm like,
the best.
I've never been to a Sizzler in my life. Like, they're not really around There's a few.
They're not.
There's a few, but they're not really around anymore.
The Applebee's thing really took a hit. Like, Sizzler was Applebee's before Applebee's, and I ride with Sizzler. All right, thanks to Francis Williams. Thanks to Sean Hyken. Thanks to super producer Brenden. Thanks to all of you. Have a terrific Thursday. We got a Fancy Coffee Friday. Tomorrow morning, we'll talk to you then, 620 Rip City Radio.